Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. Let's talk about being a leader. Let's talk about being the go-to person. Let's talk about growth. All of these things are interconnected. We don't know how. I don't know how, but I'll tell you who does know how. The author of the amazing new book, The Leader Effect: How to Grow Faster by Leading the Market. Erika Hecht, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, David. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
So let's talk a little bit about the professional journey that brought you to the work that you're doing today, and what were some interesting detours and pit stops along the way?
Absolutely. So my entire career has been about moving markets forward and advancing progress and driving growth within the tech sector. And it's involved time working with startups to the likes of, giants like IBM. And throughout that path, I've had opportunities to lead strategy, marketing, sales, and business development, and running go-to-market teams. My background's also included a lot of ecosystem building and co-innovation, and I'm sure we'll talk about that some today. And I absolutely love what I do. Tech is an amazing industry to be in. We work with companies whose technology innovations are shaping the future, and we partner with them to make a bigger difference in the world and to grow faster along the way by demonstrating their industry leadership. And some of the pitfalls and things that I've encountered, during this time have led to a couple points that I want to bring up. First, today, companies now more than ever are in reactive mode. And throughout my career, I've seen so many companies reacting to the latest market disruption, reacting to the latest feature that their competitor, puts out there, reacting to having to meet their numbers. And it's only getting worse, right? So today we're in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment. And one of the things that I say in the book is that the line between relevance and irrelevance is razor thin. So today, standing still is like falling behind, right? At the same time, I also see these tech companies really underestimating their potential, right? So while they're chasing their features and their quarterly numbers, there's this bigger opportunity to lead their industry and to demonstrate leadership at every stage of their growth. And then they grow faster along the way. A third thing that I've seen is that a lot of go-to-market is the same, right? So think about it. A lot of companies are following the same playbook, right? There isn't a ton of innovation when it comes to go-to-market. So these tech companies are focused on their technology innovation. We try to match that with go-to-market innovation. And the last key point that really has come out across my career is this best inputs to best outputs philosophy. And I call it go-to-market innovation. And it's even more important in this AI world. And it involves co-innovating internally with your teams, as well as co-innovating with your market. And that's how you drive the best thinking. It's how you drive original thinking. And it's how you move your go-to-market from ordinary to extraordinary. And it's how you advance your industry forward. So all of these things came out during my time across my career, and its origins started at SPSS. And so when I was at SPSS, it's a $300 million predictive analytics company that was ultimately bought by IBM. And interestingly, when IBM bought SPSS, not only did they buy the company, but they bought their category leadership that we built. So our teams really helped define the predictive analytics market before AI came onto the scene, right? And we drove double-digit growth in the mature market for their flagship business during this time, and it positioned them for the acquisition. And so while I was at SPSS, I flipped their go-to-market approach from being reactive to proactive, from being typical to being novel, from our teams being exhausted to being energized. And it involved this go-to-market co-innovation that I mentioned. So at SPSS, my experience there really sparked the origin of what I now call growth through industry leadership, which is what the book is all about. And by following this approach, that's how you achieve the leader effect.
You mentioned two terms that I want to just kind of dig into as far as a plain English definition for people who might not know. What you talked about co-innovation a couple of times in that segment there. What is co-innovation if someone has never heard that term before?
So co-innovation is really about collaborating with the minds around you and to drive it to a good purpose.
And not necessarily inside your organization, correct?
Right. So a big part of it is co-innovating with your community and co-innovating with your ecosystem and building ecosystems. And that's really powerful when you do those things.
Which leads me to my next question. People think of ecosystems as like, dirt, branches, trees, leaves. That's our ecosystem, water, air. In the business sense of you using the term ecosystem, what does that mean? How does that work?
So really, it's your community. It's the community of stakeholders that you work with. It's the partners, it's the customers, it's the prospects. It's those that have a common interest in you related to this, in the context of this book, the leadership position that you want to take.
People need to go back and listen to that multi-part answer that you just gave because there's so rich, some rich material there for further exploration. One thing that jumped out at me that I'd love you to riff on a little bit, you said the line between relevance and irrelevance is thinner than ever before. Give me some riffs on that. What does that mean? What might be an example or two?
So if we think about it in the context of what's going on in the landscapes today, right? There's geopolitical conflicts, right? There's Chat GPT and Gen AI coming out. There's agentic AI coming out. And in the tech sector, companies are thinking about, well, what does this mean for them, right? And so they're reacting to this latest disruption. And so if you have a strategy that goes bigger than just your product and what you sell, then you're going to be more relevant going through all of these upheavals and swings, right? As the market's going back and forth. And so if you're not ready, and if you don't have this larger voice, you're at risk of being becoming irrelevant to the company that's going to step up and take more of this leadership role.
And I know that you've broken your system down into 3 specific phases, kind of big picture phases called accelerate, elevate, and dominate. Could you just tell us a little bit about what each of those phases looks like and what we're doing in the accelerate phase, what we're doing in the elevate phase, and what we're doing in the dominate phase?
Absolutely. So the accelerate phase is really about this foundational transformation to accelerate growth, right? So you're looking at how you can step into this bigger role and sell beyond your product. Your product's still important. You want to make sure that this leadership role that you take is connected to your product. In addition to thinking about how do we sell more, you think about, well, how can we lead more, right? And you're developing strategies for your go-to-market that are going to be operationalized in elevate and dominate. So it also includes, this, what I call strategic boldness, right? Stepping into this bigger role. It includes, expanding your aperture in terms of your mindset to not just executing, but also influencing. How can you influence your market? And then thinking about too, what are the stories that are going to bring all of this to life and who's going to be on this team, right? Like you want to make sure that your growth through industry leadership engine is really well set. So that's pretty much the accelerate phase. And companies can start seeing results really in this phase within months, because if they're really getting focused on their buyer, how they can deliver more to their buyer, and have these conversations that are going to really attract the buyer to them and gain stronger interest. So that's a lot of what accelerate is. And one last piece that I'll add that ties back to some of my comments in the opening is, what's their hidden, bigger potential? Every company has that. So we'll take a look at that as well.
Hold on. This one is so good, even I'm taking notes. Listen, are you a CEO, founder, or corporate executive ready to fix your market obscurity problem and gain the market eminence you and your company deserve? Cool. Book your private Market Eminence Roadmap call with me, and let's see what might be possible for you. The link is simple. doitmarketing.com/call. See you over there. Now, I gotta get back to taking more notes. Let's talk about the skeptical executives that might be listening. First of all, executives, be less skeptical. Listen up. This is important. But so here's why, Erika, they might be a little bit skeptical. They've heard of thought leadership. They've heard of provide value to your marketplace, right? Provide insights. They've heard, be more visible, serve before you sell, add value at every touch point. But what you're talking about is a quantum leap above and beyond that. So talk a little bit just to the skeptical executive that is hearing things like co-innovation, ecosystem, thought leadership, add value, lead the conversation. They might think it's like a glorified PR campaign. This is so much further and faster and deeper and cooler than that. But in your own words, how would you address that little bit of skepticism if people think they've heard some version of this before? Because, of course, they haven't. But please address that.
Well, so I can answer that powerfully and simply, right? And I'll start with your comment about thought leadership. The interesting thing about thought leadership is that it's thoughts. It's missing the action part. This is about advancing your industry forward, advancing progress, and it takes action and it takes commitment. But if you build your go-to-market around it, it's a better way to be, because it is more energizing. It's bringing your teams together. So a lot of what go-to-market is today, I'll say I'm a skeptic too. I'll say I'm a skeptic in a way that I don't think companies can go to market the way they always have if they want to stand out and do all the things that you talked about, right? Yeah. It comes back to this relevance, like who's going to be relevant in the market. You can't just claim or declare that you're a market leader. You need to demonstrate it, and demonstrating it is part of your go-to-market.
Yeah, really interesting. So if I'm an executive, I'm a C-suite leader, I'm a board member of one of these future-changing type of organizations that you work with, is there like a self-assessment? Can I take a snapshot of, okay, here's where we are now, and here's some indicators that we're doing well, and here's some indicators that there's room for improvement? And then what would be some questions that the executives and leaders listening right now could just kind of take a little quick x-ray of what they have going on and figure out, what's working and where do they need some help?
So as part of the work that I do, I do have this assessment that I will take leaders through, and there's a piece of that in the book for folks that want to get the book. But we really do take them through this journey from going from just being ordinary and existing, right, to becoming more of a market player.
Yeah.
People are knowing you exist. Now you're a market contributor, to a market influencer, and then to a leader. right? And so we take them through this progression, and it comes back to these principles that go alongside growth through industry leadership, right? So principle number one, and again, there's things in the framework that go in a deeper level, but just to keep this top level, right? But so, for accelerate, like we talked about, it's going into this bigger, purpose, right? And having more influence. And it's really about getting your house in order, right? And so if your house is in order, you don't want to move to the elevate phase. What I say is that, and you mentioned accelerate, elevate, dominate, and we spent more time on accelerate, but elevate's all about elevating your sales performance, right? And what I say is a lot of companies jump right into elevate, but they underinvest, right, and accelerate. They underinvest in the foundation.
Yeah.
And then there's this dominate phase, right, which is really where you scale up this part on demonstrating industry leadership. So along the way, we're making sure that the companies are growing faster. So elevate really does focus on the sales performance, and we want to drive this faster growth under elevate. A big piece of it is about building trust with your market, right? And then establishing yourself in a place where you're owning the conversations that matter, right? And then you're pulling it down, you're creating this market pull to your product. So if you're not having meaningful conversations with decision makers, and it's hard for you to get a seat at the table, that's a really good indication that you're not doing elevate well, right? If you want to shorten those sales cycles and you want to have companies be pre-sold on you, you want to really make sure that you're doing this well, right?
Yeah.
And then with dominate, the next question I would have, so dominate again is really about demonstrating that industry leadership daily. And companies really don't understand the power of dominate because they don't know that it exists. This is part of taking your go-to-market from ordinary to extraordinary, right? So if you're feeling like you're just like everybody else out there, your teams are busy, they're churning out content, they're having these conversations, but they are more busy work than driving new business, then you really want to think about adding dominate into your mix.
And I know you have a couple of really great success stories baked into the book as examples of companies and organizations that are doing this right and or doing this with your help or both. What are a couple of case studies from the book that you can get people's appetite whetted with?
So there are 5 success stories in the book, and there are also a number of case studies. Mm-hmm. Other companies out there in the market that are doing amazing things. And so I'll give you a little bit of both, right? So I have a client in the space industry, right? And they are really working to unite and ignite space, right? So that way, by taking this approach, this leadership approach, that space commercialization, so what I'm talking about here is more products going into space, is accelerated faster and at scale. And it's super important for national security, but it's also important for everyday economic prosperity. Every day, companies and people don't realize this, but you're interacting with space every day. When you're using your phone, when you're using GPS, right? There's so many pieces and there's so much innovation that is going out there in the space industry. And so in this case, my client has achieved 10x in impact within just 3 years. And their community where they started out, so this is an example of a younger company. So all size companies can demonstrate industry leadership, which I think is really an important point because it's attainable for anyone, right? Yeah. If they follow this. And so not only have they driven this great economic impact, but their community is 6,000 plus strong. And they are in what I call the leader effect flywheel, where opportunities now are coming to them. And some of them, you could say, are even bigger than they had imagined, right, when they first got started. So they're in the full effect of the flywheel. I have one more example that I'll share, which is interesting related to this conversation, but like think about HubSpot. So HubSpot, most people know, right? They sell software that helps go-to-market teams generate leads and move them through to close, and they have a CRM, and they've become this undisputed market leader around the category of inbound, right? But they didn't just talk about the value of inbound; they demonstrated it. They became a convener. They've built this ecosystem, and they've brought people together, communities together, and their growth and their sales has skyrocketed. And now whenever you think about inbound, they own that conversation, right? So if there's a market disruption that happens and people are trying to figure out how do they leverage inbound, you're going to look to HubSpot, right? There's all this trust in the market. So there's all of these examples of companies that really are growing faster and demonstrating industry leadership. And there's a quote that I share in the book that Deloitte shared, that companies that do ecosystem innovation are growing twice as fast and are 2.5 times as more profitable. So this is the way the world is going.
Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. You mentioned that this is available to companies of any size. I'm curious, as far as the way that you work with your clients, what are the various things on the menu? What does, Erika and Market Ascent look like? Small, medium, large, and super size. Like how would someone get their feet wet? And then what is super deluxe going all in on this?
Well, so a great place to start is with Accelerate, right? So each phase of this builds on each other and it's iterative.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, companies are at different stages of growth, right? So the framework is meant to be flexible. That's why we do that assessment when we start to work with the company and see where they're at. And then we could see, do they have Accelerate and Elevate, locked away? Do they need lighter versions of Accelerate, and Elevate and just some fine tuning, right? And then, really again, where you get the full value of this is with the Dominate, but you're gaining lift at every stage. So we offer the framework, different ways, and we'll work with companies on that to make sure where they should start. And then we also offer what I call these go-to-market co-innovation, workshops and labs. So like if they need help on their strategy, we've got something for that. If they need something related to their messaging, they've got something for that. If they're really trying, they're really, really excited about Dominate, and they want to start thinking about, what specifically we could own and what's our sweet spot. Picking the topic is very strategic, but again, it's going to be more than just the talk, like you said earlier. It's going to be more than just some fancy PR campaign, to use their words. So what is it that you're going to own, that you're actually going to walk it, talk it, act on it, demonstrate it?
As we're landing the plane, I know that you are also very committed and very involved in your local business community in New Mexico and a couple of really cool initiatives there. Talk about that for a minute, because I think that really adds texture to who you are and your commitment to share this work far and wide wherever it can have the most impact.
Well, so what's interesting in my work is not only am I helping the technology organizations, but I'm helping technology enablers. So people who care about ecosystems, right? So there's the local ecosystem here in New Mexico, and I'm so committed to seeing our state move forward. And it's an exciting time to be here in New Mexico because there's a lot of tech innovation that is being unleashed. So I work with the New Mexico Technology Council to help advance industry forward. I also work with one of our legislators on how we advance the technology industry forward in the state of New Mexico. And then I'm doing it through the work that I'm doing with the space industry. So it's a national effort that I'm doing there. But what we talk about is how it's from New Mexico for the nation, right? And then one last really big passion of mine is getting more girls into tech and helping develop the next generation of tech leaders. And so I've done some work in ed tech here locally, and we're doing some really innovative things to build pathways to turn, this is one of my clients' leadership stance that we worked on together, to turn more learners into leaders. And so we are using the growth through industry leadership for framework for that. And one last point that I'll share with you too, it's my mission really to help more tech companies have a greater impact in the world with their tech. These leaders, these founders, I mean, this takes so much work, so much commitment. This book was really written for them. And, I want to give them cheers for their journeys and their ambition. So it's really about enabling them. And the more that we can enable the tech to have a greater impact and shape a better future, the better it is for everybody.
10,000%. I love that. So the book is The Leader Effect, How to Grow Faster by Leading the Market. Erika, tell people where can they go to get connected and stay connected to more Erika Hecht brilliance. Obviously, buy the book. That link will be in the show notes. But where else and how else should people connect with you?
Absolutely. So I think a great place to connect with me is on LinkedIn, and of course to reach out through me at the website. And one other thing I'll mention is the growth through industry leadership principles that I was speaking of are on my website too. So if you want to take a look at those, that's also another good way to really embrace all of that, what we've talked about today.
And that's marketascent.com.
Correct.
Excellent. So the link to Erika's LinkedIn and the main website, and of course the book, will be directly under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Erika Hecht, thank you for your commitment to entrepreneurial growth, business growth, and future growth of companies and organizations that are making a big difference. And with your help, we'll be able to amplify that difference even more.
Thank you so much, David. It's a real pleasure to be here today.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.